That's cool. I like it. When you do it, it has a very... It has what's the word I'm looking for?
It reverberates.
Yeah, you got a good clap.
That's because you have to have a little cup.
Yes, I see that.
It's like one of those little, you wouldn't remember this. It's like a monkey that had a little symbols in its hand that goes back and forth. It's one of those little crank up things, wind up things.
Yeah.
I just dated myself there, but that's okay. I'm really open.
I know what those are. I know what those are.
Oh, but you know what? I just realized I don't have my microphone. We did see those in those, what was those? Oh my gosh, the big picture books we always got out of the library where you had to look at everything and there were just the dioramas of all the details. What was that called again?
I Spy.
I Spy.
I was just looking up I Spy the other day. I Spy is still so inspiring to me.
It's huge. It's still big.
It makes, when I look at I Spy was actually one of the first like real visual inspirations that I got as an artist. It made me feel it, and when I say that, what I mean is like the way that it made me feel to look at those pictures triggered very specific emotions based on like the color of the picture, the way it was set up, the way everything was arranged. It was actually one of the first times that I ever looked at a still image and felt an emotion that I could associate with that image, which I actually made note of that when I was a kid because I loved how that felt. So for example, if I looked at like a certain color scheme, like I remember there's this one, well, I mean, there's so many that like come to mind when I think of this, but we'll just take, for example, like they had this one where it was like they had a Christmas book and it was a Christmas window.
I know, I loved the Christmas
The Christmas
one.
window felt like old and nostalgic, and it made me feel old and nostalgic. It made me feel like I was looking at an old time memory that I had and then this is what I felt when I was a kid, that I was like just remembering for the first time, and I loved how it made me feel that way. And I was like, wow, literally I got those feelings just from looking at colors and objects. That's it. And so that had a huge artistic impact on me. That changed the way I thought about art and visual art and auditory art, and it changed the way that I started to make things. And I took that into my career. So I took that into like when I make thumbnails or like album art for myself, like that's what I go off of. Or like sometimes when I make a song, I'm inspired by a visual, because I look at the visual and it makes me feel a certain way. I always change my desktop background based on how I want to feel and how I want to like the song to go. So if I'm kind of like feeling a certain way, and I change my desktop background because I have a bunch of images that just make me feel certain things just to help aid me on that feeling, and it works really well. So yeah, I love I Spy.
The I Spy books was really, it was so Virgoian. It's not a word, but I just made it up. Virgoan, not another word, but I made it up. So Virgo. And my rising sign, I was just like, as soon as they weren't new when you kids were younger. They'd been out for a while. And I remember going to, it was definitely, it was a Multnomah County Library. It was the Hillsdale Library that I went into. And I found them there, and then we transferred over to the Beaverton Library. But when I found them at Hillsdale Library, I was just like, oh. And my first thought was my sister and I would have totally loved these. My first thought was Julie. Mm-hmm. You know, oh, this is so Julie. Look at all the details. It's so big too. And I opened it up and I was like, this reminds me of the dollhouse she and I made by hand as a kid. And then I thought, Mars is Virgo rising with Mars and Virgo. And I was just like, oh, I think Mars is going to really like this. I got them for Mars.
Yeah.
And I brought them home and I'm like, look, Mars. And Marissa, I said, look, honey, look what I got. Look what Mommy got. And, and Mars was just like, let me see it. But then you came over, because I got you guys specific books based upon what I know that you would like, but you saw it and you were like, oh my gosh, it's a hunt. It's a hunt and peck book. And then Kyan came over because he was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 when I first got them. And, Kyan was so, let me see. And I got a bunch of them because there were so many. I probably started off with like 5 to 7. If it came to good books, I kind of went commando on the good books, and all 3 of you just were totally into them. And I just, you guys all sat on the futon couch, just like so into this. You guys were comparing, and Mars was just like engrossed, and I just went, I think we found the next big thing. That lasted until, you were looking at I Spy until you were well into your high school years.
Yeah, I still.
Yeah.
I stopped getting the books, but like I still think about I Spy. Like I go back to it all the time. I just think that it's from like a base artistic standpoint, it's an incredible creation. And
we had talked about that.
I have huge respect for it's the one guy who like did it.
It's the one guy, and we talked about the artistic expression of it, and how impressed we were with him, and how much fun that was for him, and that he totally added to the amazing inspiration and education of a large group of people.
Yeah, totally.
That is quite an artistic contribution.
Absolutely.
So thank you to Mr. I Spy. Really, but no, you wanted to share some reflections on the last 2 episodes on your musical journey and the journey of the artist.
Well, just kind of listening to myself over the course of editing those clips, and I was able to put some things into perspective for myself. I guess first and foremost, I noticed that it's definitely like there's a really strong. I get very defensive about my art because it represents emotional vulnerability, and I feel so strongly that it like my art is me. It's a representation of who I am.
Right, just what we talked about. You are the music. You are the art.
And I notice that there's a wound that exists in me surrounding that and sharing it, because there's like, I get very defensive about like sharing my art. I get very defensive about like how it comes across to people. I get very defensive if I'm like asked questions about it.
Let me ask you, who are you defensive with when people ask you about it, or when you share it?
What do you mean?
You say I get very defensive about it. To whom?
I was defensive when you were asking me questions.
Were you?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I wish I unfortunately it's been a little while since I've listened, so I don't have like the specific examples in front of me. But there are a couple times where you ask me questions and like my answers, like I can hear some sharpness in them and I can see the wound. I can see it in myself.
Okay, so that's super insightful. So what did you find out? Where did you go back to the origin of the wound? Were you able to get to the origin of the wound?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't think I have pinpointed an exact origin. I feel as though I've always been very vulnerable and defensive about my... Well, vulnerable and defensive are kind of contradictory words. I've been very defensive about my emotional vulnerability ever since I can remember. And even before I started turning that into art and using art as a way to channel those emotions into something positive, like I've that defensiveness just kind of turned into me coveting those creations and being like, nobody can see my inner self. Like it's imperfect, and I don't want to show it to people because I don't want them to like judge me. I don't want them to like, because I think that's where it comes from.
You're so cute because I'm like, I'm mommy. You can't.
Well, I know, but that's the thing is it doesn't fully make sense to me, but I can see that it's there.
I totally get it. It's your inner child.
Yeah.
Of course. No, I'll tell you, and I've told you this story many, many times. I don't expect you to remember it. You were so young. But James had all those hard camera cases. And he would take them out and go out and do photography when you were very, very young. And he had one right by the foyer that was flat, was laying flat. And you were probably as young as like 17 or 18 months. You were still bow-legged. And you were wearing your little patter shoes. You had little patters. They're so cute. Little slip-on baby shoes. and you got up on his camera case. You started doing 2-steps and tap dancing. And he and I would stop and watch, and I'm like, oh, he's a tap dancer. I'm like, look at him go. We just totally encouraged you. Like, you would express your creativity in absolutely any way that you possibly wanted to, and we completely encouraged everything. I feel like, and I'm gonna do the quantum healer thing. I feel like a lot of this comes from past lives.
Possibly, but I think that you're also correct in the sense that I didn't express that before I had a more developed ego. I think it was early in my ego's development that I felt wounded, and there was something that I could attach myself onto. I just can't pinpoint exactly where that comes from. I mean, a part of me always goes back to the show and tell in first grade where I'm like telling them about the aliens, because that really did affect me super strong.
Yeah, I
think
that did. You were devastated.
I mean, the fact that I still remember that tells me that affected me really strong. You know?
It did. You cried quite a lot. We sat down. We were in the car. Well, we had a van at the time. We were in the van. We were driving back. You cried. You told me. I listened. You know, there was a lot of that. And I said, I know. And we had to talk about, because, okay, so we had to talk about being ourselves, our true selves, no matter who we're with. Because I shared with you that when I was growing up, that I was just being myself with everybody. Here's an example. My childhood best friend, Kristen, in Chicago, when we lived in Chicago, it was probably within the first year that we lived there. I was 4. I might have been 5. And I would go over to Kristen's house because they lived really just down the block and right around the corner. And this was in North Park. And I would go over to Kristen's house, and her mom, I loved her mom, Joanne, who's crossed now, but her mom, Joanne, was always there, loved her mom. And her mom was getting tired after a while. And her mom was sitting upstairs. They had a little family TV room upstairs, or a reading room that you could, and they had a couch. And so she was sitting on the couch, and she looked kind of tired. And I had just gone up into Kristen's room upstairs. I remember coming out, and I could see Joanne sitting there, and she was resting. I could tell she was tired, but I felt that something was growing. That's the only way I can describe it. And she smiled at me and she said, "Come here, did you have a really good time?" And I said, "I did," because I was getting ready to go home, and she had to call Nana to let her know that I would be walking around the corner, because we were allowed to walk ourselves as little kids at that time. And so she was going to call Nana and say, "I'm sending her home." And all of a sudden I saw this little girl around Joanne, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I'm just tired, sweetie." And the little girl was there, and I just said, "Well," I said, "when you have your baby," I said, "can I hold her and help you feed her?" And her eyes popped out, and she just went, and that bothered her. And she said, "We need to get you home now." And so she called Nana and said, "I'm sending Sonia home." And I could tell that she was really bothered. And I knew that I had caused that. I felt the frequency of it. I felt the weight of it. And I thought, I did something, but I wasn't quite sure what I did. And she kind of forcefully pushed me out of the house. And I walked down the thing like I always do, down the block. I even remember their little alley in their driveway, all the little cracks in the sidewalks and everything, all of the weeds growing up through the cracks, walking all the way down. And when I saw Nana standing there watching for me, I went up to her, and Nana looked at me and she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I said something. Something's wrong. I did something wrong." And Nana said, "Joanne sounded kind of heavy on the phone." And she said, "Come on in. Let's go upstairs." Because because we lived on the second floor. And I went upstairs and she said, "What do you think you did wrong?" And I said, "Well, she's going to have a baby. She's going to have a girl." And I told her when she has her baby, I asked if I could hold the baby and if I could help her feed her. And Nana said, "She's going to have a baby?" And I said, "Don't you know?" And Nana said, "She hasn't told me anything." So Nana said, "All right." So I don't remember the timeline on this, but I just remember that Nana asked Joanne, "Are you pregnant?" Or that was probably, "Are you expecting?" which is what they said back then. And Joanne said, "Oh yeah, no, I got it now." Nana called Joanne and said, "Are you expecting?" And Joanne said, "Pat, I am, but I haven't told Mel yet." And Mel is her husband, Kristen's father. She said, "I just found out. I just went to the doctor and I had just come back yesterday." And she said, "And I was just really tired because she's only 2 months." She said, "I haven't told Mel yet." And that was their daughter, Annie. And so when Nana got off the phone with Joanne, she came into my room. I was in my room playing, and she sits down and she says, "So tell me what you saw." So I told her, and I told the whole thing, and she said, "Do you see that about people sometimes?" And I said, "I always know things about people." I said, "I don't understand why people just don't say what's going on with them, because everybody can see it." I didn't understand that other people didn't see what was happening. And Nana said, "You could see that she's going to have a baby." And I said, "Yeah," because I said it's a girl, and the baby girl was right there. And I said I could feel her. And Nana said, "Oh." She said, "Did you just know it?" I said, "Yeah, I just knew it. She was just right there." I said, "I think the little girl has an A name." And Nana said, "I think that's wonderful that you see this and that you know it. I just want to tell you that you can't usually say those things to people." I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because people don't understand that we have more of a sight and a knowing than other people." So what Nana did when she said that to me, and she didn't mean anything by it, and I've talked to her a million times about this since, where this has been rehashed like ad nauseum in our family, as we usually do. But what she did was she made us exclusive from the rest of humanity. And what it ended up doing is it ended up making it seem like we were very different, unique, special. But then because of the way that Nana treated her own psychic abilities, this is something that's private, very Scorpio. This is something that's private. We don't share this with other people. This is just between us. This is just between your brother, your sister, and myself and me, because your father doesn't have this. It's an exclusive, she didn't say this, but this is how it felt. She said that part, but she didn't say this part. Like, it's an exclusive gift that we are the privileged ones to have. Because, you know, my egoic child mind will go to that then. And I knew that when I was as young as 20, I was not going to raise my kids that way. I was going to raise my kids to be normal, healthy humans, and being psychic is a normal and healthy sense. And I had to work through my own defenses on that. I had to work through my own subconscious programming on, you know what? You channel light language. This is going to help people to activate their dormant DNA. This is what the guys have told me. This helps people to become more conscious, and this is something that you have to share. You cannot keep this to yourself, because it isn't flowing for me if I keep it to myself. But when I share it with everybody, it flows. Sharing, being able to see things about people that are going to help them to be more conscious about themselves, helps me to flow, and that is a form of creativity. Same thing for you with your music. And so when it came to your music, it was share this with everybody. be open about this. Your psychic abilities, share this with everybody. And so in first grade, that's exactly what you did, or second grade. That was.
I think it was first.
It wasn't because you didn't go to first grade. I homeschooled you to first grade.
No, I went to first grade. That was Miss Hawes. Miss
Oh,
Schaefer was second grade.
Thank you. You
Yeah.
did. Oh, it was kindergarten that we
Kindergarten
skipped.
was skipped,
Okay,
yeah.
we skipped kindergarten and preschool. So, okay, so yeah, that was what first grade was about. It was about, in our family, this is normal and this is what we see, and we're going to share this with everybody. And you were just being your normal, natural self. And clearly, that crossed over into other areas for you that feel very personal for you.
Absolutely, because I felt probably from what I can remember, because I don't really remember a lot of like the specifics of how I felt during this, but I think I felt really mad that I was crying all the time. I felt really mad that I would get upset so easily and that I would like vent right then and there, because I felt mad that like there are all these kids that just didn't understand it, and I felt mad that all their eyes were on me, and so that translates obviously into music and performing, because I then feel defensive about the fact that I'm on a stage in front of people. And by the way, this is all predetermined. Like if you look at my astrological chart, I have Lilith and Leo in the 5th house. So this is predetermined. In opposition to all of my Aquarius. Of course I'm going to have this wound.
I told you this is coming from other lifetimes.
Of course I have
It's
this
so cool
wound.
though. Don't
Yeah.
you love how obvious that is?
Yeah.
That's like so
But this is like,
obvious.
this is how it grew in this. It's not like I just came into this life with the wound already developed. It's like it grew based on a set of experiences, but you can see that it's something that I have to overcome in this life. Like, you can see it. And I'm aware of this now, but it's like tackling it bit by bit. I'm not gonna lie, I'm doing a great job. It's just this is like what I have to do to work through it.
These are the processes.
It's what I have to do to get through the whole thing. You know?
I know. These are, those are the karmic lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, with the psychic stuff, having Chiron in Aries in the 8th house. That was my whole early childhood. It was very Chiron in Aries in the 8th house. Saturn in Aries in the 8th house has definitely been like the whole, like, come out, just be true to yourself, hold the vision and take action from underneath this patriarchal suppression. Mm-hmm. It's my own suppression. It's something that I did to myself in other lifetimes. I had a life as a priest where my paternal grandfather, you were born on his birthday, Harvey Wilder, he was the head of the diocese. And this was not Catholic, this was evangelical, probably Lutheran, because that's the world that Papa is in. And I was a psychic in that life. I remembered this it might have been the 3rd or 4th BQH session that I had in one of my trades years and years ago. And it came up because I'm like, what is going on? And it came up the morning of the dream in preparation for that session. I saw it. I saw Harvey as the higher up priest that I had to go to. And, the big cone hat and all the symbols and the robes and everything. And here I am. And we did have confession in that, but it wasn't Catholic. And people came to me in confession and I was giving them psychic readings. And I got caught. And I knew I wasn't supposed to do that. And I did it anyway. I created that for myself. I created that Saturn in Aries for myself. And so my paternal grandfather in that life bludgeoned me to death with it was either a candelabra or it was one of the wine goggles made of silver with jewels on it. I had a memory of it coming up and down, up and down, up and down, and all of a sudden I'm like losing consciousness and like the feeling of stinging and all of that, like the death aspect of it came in. And he's so mad, trying to control. You cannot. It was so interesting. I actually woke up laughing from it because I'm like, okay, I clearly created this myself. And then I looked at these synchronicities with it. He left his body. He died 2.5 months before I was born, so we'd never meet.
Mm.
I was like, I don't think that's an accident.
Yeah.
There are no accidents.
Yeah.
And I was like, isn't that so interesting? He, in this life, I come through as his second to the last granddaughter, and he doesn't even face me as my grandfather. But he's come to me, and from the spirit world a lot. He's come to me often around Papa. But yeah, we create these things for ourselves. And first of it is the recognition of it, because that helps you to take responsibility for it and know that you can shift it. So now that you recognize from editing the last 2 episodes for the last 2 weeks, like, how do you feel from witnessing your defense on it? Like, what kind of shifts have you had within yourself?
I feel happy that I've witnessed it. I feel, when I was editing it, I felt kind of ashamed that I was like doing it to like see myself react without being aware of it. I didn't dwell on that for too long. It was just a momentary feeling of like, oh God, I'm saying.
I know you came out and you were like, well, editing your own episodes is a big eye opener.
Yeah. I was like, there's no better therapy than spending 45
You
minutes
did.
listening to yourself.
You did.
Yeah.
And I was like, what'd you find? I'm defensive.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, but this is your process. It's good that you learned it. It's one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is so that we're both learning about ourselves through this. But it's also, it's a great, as I shared with you, it's good to have this on recording. I wanted to do this podcast with you because, number one, we wanted to create all these beautiful memories. Number two, I wanted you to come into a higher state of consciousness for yourself. I mean, you're my son. I'm your parent. I will never stop nurturing you and fostering your growth. And this podcast does this. And third, I want you to become that at that level of self-awareness, and it's fun for me. This is fun. It's fun for me to be able to nurture you into greater adulthood, because honestly, compared to most of your peers, you're way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game.
I hear that a lot.
Well, and your generation is really wise. I mean,
yes.
I know a lot of people of your generation.
I don't think it's just me. I've met so many people that are my age that are like just so insightful and
Really
so
insightful.
Self-tackling and just the
Wise.
the wiseness, the wisdom, the ability to recognize your own pitfalls, make something of your mistakes, and be self-aware is something, and I hear other people commenting on this too. Our generation has a lot of self-awareness that the older generations apparently aren't. Just how you were confused when you were like, how can not everyone seeing this? I was confused when I learned that this level of self-awareness was unique to younger children.
I know. I felt that way too with my generation as well. But the plus with my generation as well, we had split in half, and half of my generation followed the boomers and our parents' generation and grandparents, and they're old. They believe all the gobbledygook that's going on, all the nonsense. They are not aware. They don't know what's really going on. And half of my generation came into that, and then 2020 also that half split that half in two as well. And so now it's a much smaller part of my generation. And my generation, we're all in our, I would say, mid-40s going all the way up to just about 60. That's my generation's small. Mm-hmm. Gen X is small. And that's our group. And there's not a lot of us anymore that are really realizing the consciousness that's here, this evolution of humanity that's occurring. But for those of us that birthed you guys, I've noticed, because there are other of your generation who also have parents of my generation that I have talked with, some of them are my clients, who are saying, yeah, we're like, where's everybody else? Why are we some of the few that are, I'm like, my 20-something-year-old is like so aware, and we have these deep, deep conversations.
A lot of parents aren't there and their kids are.
No,
That's what it comes down to. Actually, most of my friends that I feel are really centered, they got it way before their parents.
They have it way before their
and
parents.
actually, they are helping to show their parents as they grow older, like their parents have grown tremendously just from listening to them.
Just from listening
and
to
their own reflections. But most of my friends, they're that way. They were born self-aware, and they've recognized when things in life need to be changed. They've recognized that it comes from within. They're diving within to figure it out. And then they share that, usually with me, and then they share that they're like, yeah, I recognize that my parents, I mean, it's everything that we talk about. It's like most of my friends are also talking about this stuff to some level. It's just, I happen to have a mom that was doing it at the same time. I happen to have a mom that was doing all this stuff like as I was growing up. A lot of my friends, they didn't have that. They figured it out after they left their parents, or when they were in high school, or when they were even in middle school. Sometimes they started to learn this stuff.
I love talking with your friends, and I know many of them actually, and I've spent time with them physically, especially when I used to live with them and I used to come down and talk with them. And I've totally forgotten the name of the lovely friend of yours who was staying on the couch.
Tom.
I so love Tom.
Yeah. Tom's
we had
awesome.
some of the best conversations. And like we're waiting for you because I came down for our family day, and I met Tom in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And and we're just standing there, we're talking about the pandemic and da-da-da-da-da. And because he started off with, I've been diagnosed with COVID, I just want you to know. And I don't know if you're okay, but I'm like, I don't care, I have an immune system. We just started talking about what's really going on with the world, and he's so conscious. He was so heart-centered too, like his heart is so huge. I just love talking with him, and we just were talking about the state of the world, the state of frequency, and he just kept like big blinking at me. So I'm telling these things, and then he's like, wow, and you had not come down yet. And he's like, who are you? I said, I'm Colby's mom, by the way. And he goes, oh my God, you're Colby's mom. And he's like, oh, I've heard of you.
Yeah.
And
he said at one point, he's like, you gotta have her over more often.
That's what he said when you came down. He goes, he's like, well, you gotta have your mom over more often.
Yeah.
And then Trevor came down, and Trevor goes, are you guys talking shit?
Yeah.
I said, yeah. And he's like, he said, Tom said to him, she's got to come over. And he said, she's here every week, dude. He's like, you gotta be here when she comes in. And he's like, we can have some really enlightening conversations. Mm-hmm. I love talking with him. Trevor's hilarious. Mm-hmm. Love talking with him. Kieran's wonderful. It was just all of your friends, everybody, Dakota. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Just really conscious people who understand what's going on and are trying to figure out how they can better influence society, how they can create their own niche in it, and how they can feel more comfortable with themselves with the majority of people who are not conscious. That's the thing with my generation, with your generation, with the millennials. The boomers that are conscious have been having these issues too. Mm-hmm. How can I be truly myself in the world with the majority and not experience full-on hate, full-on judgment, I'm so used to people saying to me, you are really weird, you're really different. That's been going on my entire life. That's not new. There's nothing unique about that for me. And that's something that happened to you three kids simply because you, A, chose that as your path in this lifetime. B, I'm your mom.
Yeah.
This has just been our life. And I was never going to not be myself with you three so that you three could choose to go to public school because it was your choice. I wanted to homeschool full time. You guys didn't want to homeschool full time. You wanted to interact with society. And I said, okay, it's your choice. It's your life. I'm going to support this, but just know that when you go out and you interact with everybody in public school, There's going to be challenges to truly be yourself the way we are in our family, in our household. And you experienced that. And I watched you guys suppress. I watched you guys hide. All three of you are highly sensitive people. I watched you try to figure out how you are going to adapt and interact. But the great thing with your generation is that there are more of you that are now becoming conscious in your generation. So even though you guys went off to a public high school or a public school, and then I ended up putting you in the Odyssey program, public, but yet very unique and very small, pretty much all the kids in that school were also unique and parents more conscious. I had so many conscious conversations with so many of your friends' parents. Kyan with the Nelsons. I mean, his friends, his best friend, the Nelsons, all conscious conversations with the Nelsons, total mind-blowing higher consciousness. I mean, you know, Noah's mom practices yoga every day and is, you know, doing meditation retreats and vipassanas and whatnot. I mean, that's normal. And Mars, a couple of Mars's friends, very conscious parents. Mars, of course, attracted all the queer friends. And then all their parents were like, we feel like we're kind of a freaky family. And I said, oh, you're normal in my world. And then that just opened up the floodgates. And then, you know, and they're like, you know, we feel like we're really different. And like, this is normal. It doesn't, I mean, God, source, great spirit, universe makes everybody. Why would queer be wrong? But why is the rest of society making queer wrong? And I'm like, it's not wrong. Because queer people have always existed. And welcome to the club. And this is normal in my world. And then, you know, and with your group, it was all about like I would say from 95, and we said this before, from 1995 to 1999, that specific 4-year period, all of you coming in this big wave of really experienced souls in the body. And I've talked with a lot of you, and really, really conscious, really ancient souls. We call ancient, and I'm going out of timeline by just saying you're really experienced and coming in very smart and sharp and really trying to figure out how you can mold the world into a different thing. With Mars being born in 2000, a little bit different. Mars coming in 2000 is that year of the metal dragon that year. And everybody from 2000 and on in those years, very, very different. I would say there's a 3-year period there where it ends in 2003 where Kyan's little group comes in. And even though you're all Gen Z, I noticed like these little sub pockets where Mars's group, because of the Jupiter and the Saturn and Gemini, there's this fear of being social. There's this intense internal creativity. The whole queer thing came in with them. And then Kyan's group with the Jupiter in Virgo and the Saturn in Cancer, and just squirrely, and not focused very much at all. And I mean, his group that spans out to about 3 or 4 years, that little subgroup in Gen Z, just so much energy. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to contain it. They don't know where to channel it. They don't know where to funnel it. And they're all like that. And so I noticed that like your core group, you guys have your own inside jokes. Mars's core group has their own inside jokes. Kyan's core group has their own inside jokes. And even though all 3 of you are in the same full generation, you all have your own little sub thing.
I noticed that too.
And I've analyzed that. I've observed that because I volunteered at Odyssey. I taught kids how to read and write. Mm-hmm. And so I would watch it. I would watch all of you were in the 6-8, Mars was in the 3-5, Kyan was in the K2, and I saw the difference.
Part of this too is that our generation has been aided in our development by technology, and technology really shapes generation, like the technology that we have now, I mean, with the internet. The internet has shaped these generations to be very specific and very different because it evolved very, very quickly. So there's a big difference between, like, I grew up with like pretty slow computers when I was young.
Oh
like
my
the
God! Do you remember
first-
dial-up?
Yeah, I remember dial-up, but but I barely even used dial-up that much. Like I'm talking about like the really like the instrumental years. Like I still played outside before I really got on like the computer and
You
stuff.
did. You were
a
outside
lot of
reading books.
a lot of my peers had the same experience. Like most of the people who are my age didn't grow up just going right onto the computer.
Right onto the computer.
So we're like the last ones who did that.
I know.
So we have a little bit more of an innate focus. We have because our minds aren't so dialed into that like quick content. Whereas like Kayan's generation, they grew up with it right in their hands.
Right in their hands all the time.
And they grew up with short form content. YouTube was already kicking. Video games were already kicking. All this stuff was already super developed. Yeah. See, when I was growing up, video games were slower. They're faster now than they were when I was young, and that was just a few years difference.
I was very controlled about it when you were younger, before it got you into Odyssey, and Odyssey.
But I'm not talking.
Put everything on. All your curriculum was online. But I'm talking.
Not even me though. I'm talking about my whole generation. Like even the kids who grew up playing video games, the video games were slower. It had a different effect.
They were very different.
They looked less realistic, so they were more easily able to remove themselves from the video games.
And then it was go outside, go play, and go listen to music. And also when you were growing up, CDs were still a thing. We were still looking at discs. We were still getting DVDs. We were still doing all of that. It wasn't the age of, everybody wasn't on their computer. With Mars, it was a little bit more, but Mars, as you remember, really spent their childhood underneath the dining room table playing with paper action figures. And then I got the Leap Pad and the Quantum Pads, but those were really rudimentary compared to what we have now. We didn't have an iPad. There were no iPads.
Right.
We didn't have any of that. I incubated you kids as much as I possibly could to keep you as natural as possible. We went to the library 3, 4, 5 times a week. And I gave you guys reading time. I was very controlled with the media, how much time you had on there. It was only when you went to kids' homes or if you were at school that changed. And you got exposed to things that you wouldn't be exposed to in our house. We really kept things as more basic as possible. You guys had a lot of playing time with your toys. We had a lot of music and a lot of books and a lot of art supplies. But yeah, with Kayan's generation, with Kayan's group in your generation, everything changed. And you can see that with his behavior now as a 19-year-old. You can totally see that. But anyway, we were starting talking about your defense. And you said that you got insight on that, and I feel like there was like another component to that, or some sort of other insight. Am I correct on that?
I think I had it more like maybe not, maybe nothing that's that. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't really feel like it to me. It feels like there are other little things, but that was like the main core of it. And a lot of my emotional like ups and downs surrounding music are motivated by that wound, as well as the that might be it. I guess that's kind of where I am right now. Is I'm like that's as far as I've gotten. Is that.
And so how does your body feel from that level of clarity on it?
So much more comfortable. Thank God. It's like that's how I feel, is it's like to just be able to recognize that it really frees you from being a victim to the waves of whatever it is that you're feeling at the time. And ultimately, one of the conclusions that I'm coming to that is connected to that, but also connected to other things in my life, is that a lot of strength, I actually think this is, from everything that I've studied and everything that I've learned and everything that I've practiced myself, strength comes from your ability to do the things that you want to do and get where it is that you want to go, regardless of how you're feeling. So not be motivated by your feeling. Be motivated by what it is that you want to do. Be motivated by your plan and your ability to take action. Because your feelings are designed to protect you. They're survivalistic mechanisms. They're designed to say, hey, that's not safe, we need to back away. They're not going to allow you to overcome things that they don't view as safe. But sometimes you have to overcome those things in order to get to the next stage of life. And so, for me, I feel like I've been battling my feelings a lot my whole life. And a lot of times it feels like I've been letting my feelings win. And that hasn't really gotten me, it's gotten me better in touch with my feelings, which is amazing. You should be in touch with your feelings. But it hasn't gotten me the physical results that I want to get. The only places that I've gotten to where I've gotten physical results are when I've used my feelings to weigh whether something is actually dangerous or whether it's just a fake danger. Like, for example, feeling like I don't want to get hurt. Like, my body will say, you don't want to get hurt, so you don't want to, spend all your time working on this thing and then put it out just for people to, hate on it. That's not a survivalistic mechanism that I should be paying attention to. It's a survivalistic mechanism that's there because my feelings want to protect me from being hurt by the opinions of other people, but the opinions of other people can't actually hurt me. And that's what my feelings don't understand. So I have to show them by just doing it anyway. And there's all this resistance that comes up when you just sit there and force yourself to do it because you're there's a part of you that's fighting. It's no, we need to be safe and incubated. We need to be safe and incubated. But you can't stay safe and incubated. You have to constantly expose yourself to things that are outside of your ideology so that you can expand and so that you can get to the next stage. And it's really, this is what I've been finding and integrating in myself and continue to integrate in myself this whole time is the ability to take action. It's what some people would call discipline. Although I think that discipline is a misguided, because it's not something that you force. You have to just you have to integrate it into yourself. It's like a receiving. And when you receive it and you act stoically, meaning that even if I feel impatient about doing something that I have to do, I do it anyway, even though the impatience is there. And I say, it's okay that I feel impatient because my outside actions reflect where I want to go, not what I'm feeling. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. That was good.
Yeah.
That was very good.